Welcome to my messy studio, everyone. My name is Mark, and I'm an artist and an art professor. And in this video, I'm going to share with you what I think are 3 of the best pieces of advice I have ever received during my art education. Advice that I pass on to my students every day and try to apply to my own work. This is a counterpoint to my previous video, where I chose violence and offered what I thought were 3 of the absolutely worst pieces of advice I have ever received. If you enjoy negativity, go and watch that video. But in this video, we're going to keep things positive, so let's get started. One way to distinguish a master from an artist of the second tier is to look at parts of the artwork that are outside the main area of focus. If you're looking at a portrait, inspect the way the cloth is handled at the bottom corner. If you're looking at a landscape, pay attention to the way the outcrop of trees is rendered in the background. A master artist will paint the secondary detail with the same care that was given to the main part of the painting, whereas a lesser artist will treat those details as filler, a throwaway part of the painting that no one will bother looking at. This doesn't mean that a master needs to render every part of the painting to an equal amount of obsessive detail, though some painters, Jan van Eyck for example, do. It simply means that a master recognizes that a painting is the sum of its parts, and that even small, seemingly unimportant details contribute to making the painting stronger. Such careful attention to detail is evident even in artists who have a tendency to treat their areas of focus with greater tightness and deal with things outside those areas with greater looseness. Rembrandt is a fantastic example of this, with elements outside the area of focus rendered just to the right degree of visual pull, allowing them to suggest depth and create movement without being distracting. We have countless examples of masters taking extra steps, and not even in important commissions, but small-scale drawings. In this drawing by the German illustrator Heinrich Kley, great attention is paid to the environment the characters occupy, even though the rendering is incredibly light and loose. Notice the collection of objects in the corner was likely drawn from a reference. A lesser artist would have worked from the imagination there, and the result would have been far less interesting. The great thing about this advice, and actually the other 2 pieces of advice, is that they can be interpreted in different ways. We're talking about treating everything with equal attention in terms of craft, but it also applies to the ideas behind your work. When looking at sketches done by my students, they're often very specific about what they want to do in the main part of the picture, but when I ask them what's happening in the background, they tell me, oh, there I'm going to put some kind of landscape. I tell them to be specific. If it's a cityscape, what kind? A cozy winter scene in the Cotswolds, or a bleak post-apocalyptic ruin? The former will suggest one interpretation, while the latter will suggest something else entirely. So think things through in every part of what's happening in your picture. Before we talk about this important piece of advice, give me a second to tell you about my YouTube membership program, which will give you access to a large library of classes and 2 new classes every single month. The classes cover a variety of topics and will benefit artists in every stage of their development, from the blossoming art student who's learning the basics to the fully flowered artist who is trying to hone their skills. Have you ever worked on something for several hours, walked away perfectly content, only to come back the next day to find that you've made some god-awful error? Why didn't you catch it when you were working on it? The answer is you were staring at your work for too long, got used to the mistake, and didn't see it. And then, when you step back from your work, your eyes reset and you noticed it. Perhaps one day, some intrepid neuroscientist will discover the mechanism behind this annoying phenomenon. But artists have known the remedy for it for centuries, and it is to step back from the artwork. This is something I do at every step of my process, after I sketch in my initial design, after I block in my initial values, and then in regular intervals. It's also super helpful to give the artwork distance in terms of time, by turning it around and then not looking at it for a while. But this luxury of time is something we artists don't always have. Besides stepping back, there are other ways of looking at your work with fresh eyes. When drawing symmetrical objects, bottles, vases, and so on, I sometimes struggle with getting the symmetry right. And one great way of ensuring that whatever angle or curve you have on one side repeats on the other is to simply flip your drawing upside down. Again, who knows why this works, but it does. Another way of doing it is to look at your drawing at a low angle. This exaggerates the angles and curves and makes it easier to catch mistakes. Now obviously, flipping your board upside down or tilting it is not useful with subject matter that needs to be viewed a certain way, like a landscape or a portrait. So here is another popular distancing method, looking at your artwork through a mirror. The mirror has the added benefit of reversing the image, making it even fresher to your eyes. This is such an incredibly powerful tool for seeing mistakes that many landscape artists include a small pocket mirror in their painting kit and take it wherever they go. But as with the first piece of advice, distance yourself can be interpreted in another way. Because not only should you distance yourself from the work physically, you should also distance yourself from the work emotionally. We all have a tendency to become emotionally attached to our work, treating it as a precious object. And while taking pride in your work is a good thing, too much emotional investment is detrimental. I sometimes work in media where correcting mistakes is either difficult or impossible, and I'm asked, don't you get anxious that you're going to make a mistake? My answer is, of course, but I'm able to push through because over the years I learned not to invest too much emotional energy into what I'm doing. There's a careful balance to be made because you do want to care about the quality of your work, but not to the point where it becomes a liability. I like to joke with my students by saying, pretend like your art is being made by a very good friend. You want your friend to do well and are overjoyed when they succeed. But if that friend fails miserably, it's okay because it didn't happen to you. Another reason to keep your emotional distance is because creativity can otherwise feel like an emotional roller coaster. A project often starts on a high, full of promise for a brilliant outcome, and then deeper into the process, as you encounter unexpected difficulties, the excitement stalls or drops suddenly, and you'll experience a low, filled with self-doubt and frustration. Should you push through and recover, you might experience another high, which is then followed by another low, causing you to abandon the project altogether. Such highs and lows, besides being exhausting, make you lose objectivity, because in almost every case, the project is neither as excellent as the high would suggest, nor the disaster that the lows would make you believe. And keeping an emotional detachment all the way through, and not falling for the self-generated hype or the self-generated hate, will allow you to decide if corrections are actually needed and will make the creative process go smoother. Emotional detachment is, of course, easier said than done, and is not something that happens instantly. But once you realize that emotional detachment consistently makes your work better, you'll find that it's easier to stay impartial, and as you grow as an artist, not grow an inflated sense of your own self-worth through your successes, nor beat yourself up over your failures. After all, the work is being done by your best friend, and not by you. Learning to make art well is a frustratingly long process. Progress usually comes quickly at first, since the difference between knowing nothing and knowing a little is pretty great, and you might see tremendous growth in the first few years. Unfortunately for most of us, after this initial exciting burst of progress, improvement starts to slow down and is measured not in months, but years, and sometimes even decades. Even worse, sometimes you hit plateaus, years where no progress is being made at all, or you're progressing so slowly that you might not even notice it. However, there are things you can do to improve the quality of your work immediately, and that is to plan better. While every artist's creative process is different, I don't know of any artist whose process involves starting on a piece without any planning whatsoever. Even abstract artists whose work is grounded in spontaneity and improvisation take time to select their palette of colors, make sure their paint is just the right consistency, carefully choose their arsenal of brushes, and make sure their painting surface is prepared just so. If you've never thought about how to plan a work of art, my video where I explain my creative process might be a good starting point. But ultimately, you have to decide what your process is going to be all by yourself. However, since no idea comes to your head fully formed, the process needs to be iterative, consisting of different kinds of studies, concept studies, compositional studies, color studies, etc., a workflow that systematically moves from a rough to a more refined stage. Such a process will give you time to strengthen your ideas and eliminate potential mistakes. It can also be an opportunity to experiment with different technical approaches and decide in what order you're going to do things. The most crucial decisions you make in a work of art, decisions by which a work fails or succeeds, are made well before that work of art is even started. So, the more carefully you plan, the greater the chance that you will arrive at something successful. And, harking back to the previous advice for dealing with emotional roller coasters, the greater the chance the process itself will be efficient and with minimal drama. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe and consider becoming a channel member. Thanks so much for watching, and see you back in my messy studio very soon. Bye for now.